I saw my mother kiss my best friend in the middle of my birthday party, wearing exactly the same dress as me, and shouting for everyone to hear, "Look who can still conquer any man she wants." I stood paralyzed holding my piece of cake, watching the woman who gave birth to me publicly destroy the most important friendship of my life, just to prove that at 55 she was still more desirable than her own 32-year-old daughter. Diego was trying to break free from Marta's forced embrace, while 30 guests watched in absolute shock, some letting out muffled screams of horror at the grotesque scene unfolding in my living room, decorated with gold balloons. The red dress identical to mine clung to her body like a second skin, every detail perfectly copied from the lace on the shoulders to the cut that I had chosen with such care in the boutiques downtown. I realized in that devastating moment that she had secretly followed me during my shopping, noting every detail to later return to the store and acquire the same piece as part of a coldly calculated plan to humiliate me. "My God, what's happening?" someone whispered behind me, but I couldn't move or breathe properly, paralyzed by the shock of seeing my own mother transform my party into a bizarre and completely inappropriate sexual competition. The sound of glasses breaking on the floor echoed through the room as guests instinctively backed away, creating a circle of horror around the scene my mother had orchestrated as if it were the climax of a perverse theatrical play. Diego finally managed to free himself, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand while looking at me with pleading eyes that apologized for a situation that was completely out of his control, his face red with genuine embarrassment. My mother turned to me with a triumphant smile that revealed smeared lipstick and a malicious satisfaction that chilled me to the bone, as if she had just won a competition that only she knew was happening. It was as if 25 years of motherhood had been erased in a single moment of calculated cruelty that made me question everything I believed about maternal love and the limits of destructive female competitiveness. My mind refused to fully process what I was witnessing. My own mother, the woman who should have been supporting me and celebrating another year of my life, had transformed my birthday party into a public display of female competition that deeply humiliated me in front of close friends and colleagues. The red dress she wore was identical to mine in every detail. Same Italian silk fabric, same deep burgundy color, same cut that enhanced the feminine silhouette, same delicate lace on the shoulders, except that on her 55-year-old body, it looked like a desperate costume of lost youth. During the previous week, when I went shopping to choose my special outfit for the party, I spent more than 3 hours going through elegant boutiques downtown until I found that perfect dress that enhanced my fair skin and matched perfectly with my golden high heels. I never imagined that my mother had secretly followed me during that shopping afternoon, watching from afar as I tried on clothes and made my final choice, mentally noting every detail to later return to the store and buy exactly the same piece. The discovery that she had planned this public humiliation so far in advance made me feel nauseous with maternal betrayal, as if an icy knife had pierced my chest and permanently lodged between my ribs. It was impossible to believe that a mother could be capable of such calculated cruelty against her own daughter, especially on a date that should be about celebration and family joy. "Why did you do this to me?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice coming out hoarse and trembling with pain and indignation. She laughed shrilly, a sound that cut through the air like glass being scratched, and ran her hands through her platinum blonde hair that she had clearly touched up at the hairdresser that very morning. "Because I needed to show everyone that an experienced woman can still be more desirable than an inexperienced young girl," she responded with a brutal coldness that made several guests gasp in shock. Each word was a stab in my daughter's heart, confirming that this moment had been coldly calculated to emotionally destroy me in front of important people from my personal and professional life. The embarrassment intensified when I realized that some guests were beginning to whisper among themselves, commenting on the situation in low tones that created a constant and irritating buzz in the background of the silent room. One of my work colleagues, an elegant 40-year-old woman named Sandra, looked at me with an expression of genuine pity that made me feel even more humiliated, as if I were a problematic child whose parents didn't know how to properly raise. Other people began to discreetly check their phones, probably looking for excuses to leave the party early and escape the extremely uncomfortable environment that had settled in my own home. Diego finally found the courage to speak, his voice trembling slightly with nervousness. "Mrs. Marta, with all due respect, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I wasn't expecting. This caught me completely by surprise." He looked at me with pleading eyes, clearly apologizing for a situation he hadn't provoked, and I could see he was genuinely mortified at having become an involuntary part of this embarrassing spectacle. Marta, meanwhile, continued smiling with that expression of malicious satisfaction, as if she had just won an important competition, running her hands over her hips seductively and observing the reactions of those present with evident pleasure. "Don't worry, dear Diego," she said in a honeyed voice. "I know you were a little surprised by the intensity of my feelings, but this is completely natural when a truly experienced woman shows interest." The way she emphasized the word experienced made me realize she was deliberately trying to position herself as superior to me in terms of female attractiveness and sophistication. I felt my stomach turn when I understood that my own mother was using my birthday party as a stage for a bizarre and completely inappropriate sexual competition. The air in the room seemed to have become thick and difficult to breathe, laden with embarrassment and tension that made each second feel like an eternity of public suffering. It was in this terrible moment that my younger sister, Fernanda, 30 years old, appeared in the main room coming from the kitchen where she had been helping to organize drinks and appetizers, carrying a tray of mini sandwiches that she almost dropped upon, perceiving the palpable tension that completely dominated the party atmosphere. Her green eyes, identical to mine, widened in shock when she saw our mother and Diego still close to each other, and the identical red dress that Marta wore with such malicious pride. "My God, what's happening here?" she asked, quickly placing the tray on the nearest table and approaching us with hurried and concerned steps. "Why does everyone look like they're at a funeral? And Mom, why are you wearing exactly the same outfit as Isabella?" Fernanda's direct and innocent question made the general embarrassment increase even more, because she had verbalized exactly what everyone was thinking, but no one had the courage to openly question. Marta turned to her younger daughter with the same artificial and disturbing smile, clearly prepared to justify her actions with the same arrogance she had shown me. "Fernanda, darling, I simply proved to everyone here that I am still a very attractive and desirable woman, regardless of my age," she explained in a tone of voice that mixed distorted maternal pride with unhealthy female competitiveness. "Your sister needs to learn that beauty and charm are not exclusive privileges of youth, and that an experienced mother can perfectly compete with her daughter on equal terms." The words came out of her mouth with a frightening naturalness, as if she truly believed she was doing something positive and educational by publicly humiliating her own daughter on her birthday. The expression of growing horror on Fernanda's face mirrored exactly what I was feeling, a mixture of disbelief, shame, and disgust at our mother's completely inappropriate behavior. Fernanda looked at me with an expression of solidarity and growing indignation, her red hair swaying when she shook her head negatively in a sign of total disapproval. "Mom, this is completely inappropriate and cruel," she said with a firm voice, standing by my side in a clear demonstration of sisterly support. "How can you do something like this to Isabella, especially today? This is her birthday, not a beauty or popularity contest." My sister's courageous defense gave me renewed strength to face the situation, and I felt a wave of profound gratitude for having at least one family member who understood the absurdity and cruelty of our mother's behavior. Roberto, the stepfather who had married my mother 3 years earlier, finally appeared in the living room coming from the backyard, where he had been talking with some guests about soccer, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded in his absence. His 58 years were marked by a habitually calm expression that quickly transformed into confusion when he perceived the tension in the air and saw his wife posing next to Diego as if they were a couple. "Marta, what's happening here? Why is everyone looking so strange?" he asked, approaching her with cautious steps, clearly perceiving that something very wrong had happened during his brief absence. His brown eyes moved quickly between the faces present, trying to decipher the situation through the expressions of shock and embarrassment that dominated the entire room. Marta turned to her husband with that same expression of malicious satisfaction, clearly prepared to boast about her achievements of the night, as if they were legitimate reasons for maternal pride. Roberto's arrival brought a new layer of embarrassment to the situation, because now even my stepfather was witnessing the pathetic demonstration of maternal competitiveness that had completely ruined my party. "Roberto, darling, I just demonstrated to everyone here that I'm still a very desirable and attractive woman," she announced with exaggerated pride, gesturing dramatically with her hands like an actress on stage. "I proved that I can perfectly compete with younger women, including my own daughter, when it comes to capturing male attention." Roberto stood still for a few seconds, slowly processing his wife's words, his eyes moving from the identical dress she was wearing to my clearly shaken face, then to Diego, who seemed to want to disappear into the floor out of shame. The gradual understanding of what had happened was reflected in his expression, which went from confusion to disbelief, and then to what seemed to be a mixture of shame and contained irritation. "Marta, you can't be serious," he finally said, his voice low but loaded with disapproval. "Please tell me you didn't do what I'm imagining at your own daughter's birthday party." The stepfather's rhetorical question brought an even heavier moment of silence to the room, where even the sound of cars passing on the street outside seemed to have completely ceased. My mother, however, remained unperturbed in the face of growing disapproval, as if she were convinced that everyone was simply envious of her supposed victory in the game of female seduction. "Roberto, you should be proud of having such an attractive and confident wife," she replied, running her hands over her hips in a sensual manner. "Many men my age would like to have a woman capable of arousing such interest and admiration," she completed, referring to herself in the third person in a way that revealed total disconnection from the reality of the situation. The minutes that followed were psychological torture that seemed to last endless hours, with guests beginning to say goodbye quickly, using elaborate excuses about urgent appointments or family problems that had suddenly arisen. I watched my birthday party, which I had planned for weeks with such care and expectation, fall apart before my eyes like a house of cards hit by an emotional hurricane. Sandra, my coworker, approached me discreetly and whispered, "Isabella, I'm sorry this is happening to you. If you need to talk about anything, you can call me tomorrow." Your voice carried genuine sincerity, but also a pity that made me feel even more humiliated, as if I were a victim worthy of compassion instead of an adult woman celebrating her birthday. One by one, the guests approached to say goodbye with awkward hugs and forced smiles, all clearly anxious to escape that dysfunctional family situation that had become a public spectacle of epic proportions. Diego, poor thing, was visibly mortified and tried to approach me to apologize, but I couldn't look directly at him without remembering the disturbing image of my mother forcibly kissing him. "Isa, I swear I didn't know anything about this." "She caught me completely by surprise," he muttered when he finally managed to get close to me while Marta was distracted talking to Roberto. "I need you to believe that I would never do anything to intentionally hurt you. You've been my best friend for over 10 years. His brown eyes were moist with genuine emotion, and I could see that he was as traumatized as I was by the embarrassing situation that had involved us without our consent. "I know, Diego," I managed to whisper back. "I know this wasn't your fault. My mother planned all of this deliberately to humiliate me in front of everyone." When finally the last guest left the house, leaving only our dysfunctional family in the room that was still decorated with the remains of the ruined party, the silence that settled was broken only by the sound of Roberto seriously questioning his wife about her unacceptable behavior. "Marta, I need you to explain exactly what went through your head to do something like this," he said in a controlled but clearly irritated voice. "This is not the woman I married, and certainly not the kind of person I want as the mother of my stepdaughters." The implicit threat in his words finally seemed to penetrate the fantasy bubble where my mother had isolated herself. And for the first time since the beginning of the night, I could see a crack in her mask of artificial confidence. Fernanda remained by my side, holding my hand in a silent demonstration of fraternal support, as we watched our mother being confronted with the consequences of her cruel actions. "You're all overreacting," muttered Marta, but her voice had lost that tone of arrogant certainty she had maintained throughout the night. "I was just trying to prove that I'm still attractive and relevant." The words came out with less conviction, finally revealing the desperate insecurity that motivated all that pathetic maternal competition charade. It was at that moment that I understood my mother's behavior wasn't just gratuitous malice, but rather the result of a profound and unresolved midlife crisis that was leading her to compulsively compete with younger women, including her own daughters. The revelation didn't lessen the pain of the humiliation I had suffered, but at least it helped me understand that her actions had complex psychological roots that went far beyond simple calculated maternal cruelty. The conversation that followed between Roberto and my mother was painful to witness, especially when he seriously threatened to reconsider the marriage if she didn't seek professional psychological help to deal with her self-esteem issues and destructive competitiveness. "Marta, this needs to stop now," he said firmly. "I won't tolerate you continuing to hurt your daughters because of your own complexes and personal insecurities." Fernanda and I remained silent, watching our mother finally begin to emotionally crumble as the reality of the consequences of her actions became increasingly clear and inescapable. Tears began to run down her carefully made-up face, smudging the mascara she had applied so meticulously before the party, and for the first time that night she seemed vulnerable instead of malicious. I just feel so invisible lately," she sobbed, "as if no one notices me or values me as a woman anymore." "You don't understand how difficult it is to age when you're someone who has always been admired for beauty." The words came out interspersed with genuine sobs that revealed decades of repressed insecurities about aging, social relevance, and female identity, built exclusively around external validation. I began to realize that my mother was going through a profound existential crisis that was leading her to increasingly desperate and destructive behaviors in search of confirmation that she was still desirable and relevant. Although this in no way excused what she had done to me, At least it helped me understand that her actions came from a place of personal pain rather than pure calculated malice against me. Mom, if you were feeling this way, why didn't you talk to us instead of humiliating me publicly? I asked with a tired voice, still processing all the conflicting emotions that revelation had awakened. It was difficult to balance the natural compassion I felt for a person in suffering with the justified anger for having been used as a validation instrument in a competition I didn't even know I was part of. The weeks following that terrible night were a period of deep reflection and family reconstruction that completely changed the dynamic between my mother and me, forcing us to confront problems that had remained buried during years of superficial relationship based on appearances. Roberto kept his word and demanded that Marta seek psychological therapy as a condition for continuing their marriage, something she initially resisted but eventually accepted when she realized she could lose everything if she didn't change her self-destructive behavior. Dr. Silvera, an experienced 45-year-old psychologist specialized in family therapy and midlife crises, became a regular presence in our lives when my mother suggested we do some joint sessions to resolve our conflicts. During our first session, which took place on a rainy Thursday afternoon in her cozy office decorated with plants and calming paintings, Marta finally admitted that she had been compulsively competing with me for years. Not just in matters related to physical appearance, but also in professional achievements, romantic relationships, and even in the approval of relatives and mutual friends who were part of our social lives. I always felt threatened by Isabella's success, she confessed during the session, her hands trembling while holding a tissue wet with tears of genuine shame and regret. When she graduated in architecture with excellent grades, I felt diminished because I never managed to complete my own college degree due to choices I made when I was young. When she started dating interesting and successful men, I felt as if I was being replaced as the most desirable woman in the family. The brutal honesty of her confessions deeply shocked me because it revealed that our relationship had been poisoned by maternal competition for much longer than I had consciously realized. It was painful to discover that moments I thought were of genuine maternal support were actually opportunities for her to assess whether she was being surpassed by her own daughter in some aspect of feminine life. Dr. Silvera explained that my mother's behavior was a classic example of unresolved maternal narcissism, combined with an identity crisis related to aging and the loss of social relevance that many women experience. Many women who based much of their self-esteem on external admiration during youth face profound crises when they begin to realize they are no longer the center of attention, she explained during a particularly revealing session. Unfortunately, some of these women end up projecting their insecurities onto their own daughters, seeing them as competitors instead of people they should support and emotionally nurture throughout their lives. During these sessions, I also discovered that my mother had developed an unhealthy obsession with maintaining her youthful appearance, spending absurd amounts of money on aesthetic treatments, designer clothes, and cosmetic procedures that Roberto was completely unaware of. She revealed that she had created secret credit cards to finance this desperate pursuit of eternal youth, accumulating considerable debts that she kept hidden from the family out of shame and fear of judgment. I thought that if I could look younger and more attractive, people would continue to value and respect me, she explained with an embarrassed voice during one of the most difficult sessions. But the more I tried to compete with younger women, the more desperate and empty I felt inside, as if I were fighting an impossible battle to win. Therapy was revealing layers of insecurity and self-destruction that went far beyond the party incident, showing a pattern of behavior that had been developing for years and had culminated in that public display of maternal competitiveness. It was simultaneously liberating and distressing to discover the truth about our relationship, because although it explained many strange behaviors from the past, it also revealed that I had grown up in a much more toxic family dynamic than I had ever imagined. With each session, more pieces of the puzzle fit together, creating a disturbing portrait of years of subtle manipulation and maternal competition that had shaped my personality in ways I was only beginning to understand. One of the most painful revelations came during our fourth therapy session, when my mother admitted that she had deliberately sabotaged some of my romantic relationships in the past, making negative comments about my boyfriends to mutual friends or creating embarrassing situations that led men to distance themselves from me. I justified it by saying I was protecting you from men who weren't worthy, she confessed with tears in her eyes. But the truth is that I was afraid you would find someone who made you completely happy, because that would mean you needed me less. The discovery that she had actively interfered in my love life left me furious and hurt in a way I didn't know was possible to feel towards one's own mother. I remembered João, a wonderful engineer I had dated for 8 months 2 years ago, and how he had begun to distance himself after a family dinner where my mother had made subtle but venomous comments about my emotional instability and tendency to be too demanding with men. At the time, I attributed the end of the relationship to natural incompatibility, but now I realize that my own mother had deliberately and calculatingly planted seeds of doubt about my character in his mind. "Mom, you destroyed my confidence in relationships for years," I told her during the session, my voice trembling with contained anger and deep pain. "How many opportunities to be happy did you steal from me because of your own insecurity and sick need to be the center of attention?" Dr. Silvera mediated our discussion, helping us process these revelations in a constructive rather than destructive way. But the emotional damage of discovering the extent of maternal manipulation I had suffered was almost unbearable. It was like discovering that much of my adult life had been influenced by someone who should have been supporting me, but who was actually actively working against my personal happiness for purely selfish reasons. The process of rebuilding our relationship was long and painful, requiring both of us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and about the dysfunctional patterns we had perpetuated for years without consciously realizing the damage being caused. My mother had to face the fact that she had caused significant psychological damage to her own daughters due to unresolved personal issues related to self-esteem and female identity, built exclusively on external validation. While I needed to accept that my admiration and search for maternal approval had blinded me to obvious signs of manipulation and destructive competitiveness that had been happening right in front of me for years. During a particularly intense session, Dr. Silvera had us do an exercise where each of us had to list specific moments when we felt hurt or betrayed by the other, without interruptions or defensive justifications. My mother's list included moments when she felt abandoned when I gained independence, such as when I moved to my own apartment or when I received an important promotion at work that she interpreted as evidence that I no longer needed her. My list, on the other hand, included dozens of incidents where she had undermined my self-confidence, criticized my personal choices, or created competitive situations that made me feel inadequate as a daughter and as a woman. "Isabella, I never realized that my own fears were hurting you this way," she said after hearing my complete list, her voice laden with genuine regret. "I thought I was being a present and involved mother, not a destructive competitor who was sabotaging your happiness because of my own unresolved issues." The exercise was emotionally exhausting, but also essential for both of us to understand the extent of the damage that needed to be repaired through much work and patience from both sides. For the first time in my adult life, I felt I was having a genuinely honest conversation with my mother, without manipulation or hidden agendas influencing our family communication. 6 months after that disastrous birthday party, my relationship with my mother had completely transformed, moving from a toxic dynamic of maternal competition to something that was beginning to resemble a healthy adult relationship based on mutual respect and emotional honesty. Marta continued attending individual therapy twice a week, working intensively with Dr. Silvera to deconstruct decades of destructive behavioral patterns and develop a personal identity that didn't depend on external validation or competition with other women. Progress was slow and sometimes painful, with occasional relapses where she showed subtle jealousy or made competitive comments. But I could see genuine changes in her general attitude and behavior that gave me hope. Roberto had also committed to the process of change, attending some couples therapy sessions to learn how to better support his wife during this complex psychological transformation, and establishing clear boundaries about behaviors he wouldn't tolerate in the future. During a particularly significant Sunday afternoon, my mother showed up at my house unannounced, something that would normally leave me anxious due to unpleasant surprises from the past. But this time, she carried a simple bouquet of flowers and a genuinely vulnerable expression. The expression was completely different from the artificial confidence mask she used to wear to hide her deep insecurities and desperate need for constant external validation. "Isabella, I came here to truly apologize for what I did at your party," she said, her voice trembling slightly with genuine nervousness that revealed real vulnerability. "I know I've apologized before, but now I truly understand the gravity of what I did, and I want you to know that I'm working every day to become a better person." The words came out with a sincerity I hadn't heard from her in years, perhaps decades, and I could see genuine tears forming in her blue eyes without the emotional manipulation that usually accompanied her displays of remorse. "Therapy made me realize that I was using you as a distorted mirror of my own self-esteem, and that was deeply unfair and cruel," she continued, sitting carefully on the edge of the sofa as if asking permission to be there. My mother's apology was just the beginning of a reconstruction process that required establishing clear boundaries and realistic expectations about how our relationship would work going forward, without romanticizing progress or ignoring the need for concrete and measurable behavioral changes. During the following weeks, we implemented a structured communication system that Dr. Silvera had suggested, where either of us could signal when feeling uncomfortable with the other's behavior, using simple verbal codes that helped us interrupt destructive patterns before they escalated into larger conflicts. When my mother made comments that sounded competitive or manipulative, I simply said, "Yellow code." And she would immediately stop to reflect on her words and reformulate them in a more appropriate and respectful way. The system worked surprisingly well, especially because it gave both of us a concrete tool to navigate potentially problematic situations, without drama or destructive confrontation that could undo all the progress we had made. Fernanda also got involved in the process, participating in some family sessions where we discussed how all of us had contributed to maintaining dysfunctional dynamics over the years, even if unconsciously or with good intentions. It was painful but liberating to discover that I myself had developed some defensive behavior patterns that made it difficult for my mother to approach me genuinely, creating a vicious cycle where her competitiveness increased in response to my emotional distance. "All of you need to learn new ways to relate to each other," Dr. Silvera observed during a family session, "because you've created a system where no one felt truly seen or valued for who they really were." The observation was a moment of revelation that helped me understand that healing would be a bilateral process, requiring changes from all parties involved, not just from my mother, as I had initially assumed. I also needed to learn to communicate more openly and vulnerably, instead of maintaining the emotional defenses I had developed as protection against years of maternal competition. This recognition was humbling but necessary for the family healing process that we were trying to build together with much effort and mutual determination. One of the most significant milestones in our reconstruction journey happened on my 33rd birthday, exactly 1 year after the traumatic incident that had destroyed our previous relationship and exposed decades of hidden family toxicity in such a public and humiliating way. This time, I organized a much smaller and more intimate celebration, inviting only Fernanda, Roberto, my best childhood friend Carla, and Diego, who had become even closer after surviving that embarrassing experience together. Carla, a 31-year-old woman who had known me since adolescence, had witnessed many of my mother's competitive behaviors over the years, but always in subtle and indirect ways that she couldn't clearly name at the time. "I always felt your mother had something strange with you," she confessed during our preparation for the party, "but I could never put my finger on exactly what it was." Now it all makes perfect sense. I consciously decided not to invite my mother to this celebration, needing a safe space to process everything that had happened and to verify if I could enjoy a birthday without anxiety or fear of manipulation. The decision was difficult and caused me feelings of guilt, but Dr. Silvera had helped me understand that establishing temporary boundaries was essential for my own mental health and for the long-term healing process. "You're not punishing your mother," she had explained. "You're creating a space where you can rediscover who you are without the pressure of the competitive dynamic that has defined your relationship for so many years." On the morning of my birthday, I received a text message from my mother that was simple but deeply meaningful. "Happy birthday, my dear daughter. I know you need space today, and I completely respect your decision. I love you and always wish for your happiness." The message made me cry, but they were tears of relief and hope instead of pain or frustration, because it showed that she was truly learning to respect my boundaries without turning it into emotional manipulation. It was the first time she had demonstrated genuine maternal love without expectations of immediate reciprocity or attempts to control my behavior through guilt or emotional blackmail. My 33rd birthday party was exactly the opposite of the previous year's catastrophe. Peaceful, genuinely joyful, and full of people who supported me unconditionally without hidden agendas or underground competitions that poisoned every social interaction. Diego had become an even more precious friend after surviving that traumatic moment, and our friendship had deepened in ways I hadn't expected, based on a mutual understanding of how toxic family dynamics can affect innocent relationships. "You know, that kiss was the strangest and most uncomfortable thing that ever happened to me?" he joked during the party, making everyone laugh and transforming a painful memory into something we could process with healthy humor. Carla brought a homemade chocolate cake decorated with real flowers from her garden. Roberto contributed excellent wines he had chosen especially for the occasion, and Fernanda prepared a playlist of songs that marked important moments of our childhood and adolescence. The contrast with the previous year was so dramatic that it made me realize how much I had been living under constant stress due to the competitive dynamic with my mother, even when I didn't consciously recognize that tension as part of my normal emotional state. "This is the kind of party I always wanted to have," I confessed to Carla as we watched Diego and Roberto discussing football animatedly. No drama, no competition, just people who genuinely love me celebrating with me. The sense of peace and authenticity that permeated the entire evening made me understand how much I had lost by accepting manipulative behaviors as normal in family relationships that should be sources of support and emotional security. For the first time in years, I was able to completely relax during my own party, without constantly checking people's expressions around me for signs of imminent drama or hidden judgments. It was as if I had learned to breathe freely after years of involuntary restraint that had become so habitual that I didn't even notice how much it was limiting my own ability to enjoy special moments. The difference was so striking that it made me realize how many other areas of my life had been affected by the constant tension of living in a competitive and toxic family dynamic. During the months that followed my successful birthday, my mother continued to demonstrate genuine progress in her therapy and in her efforts to develop a personal identity that didn't depend on competition or constant external validation that had defined her personality for decades. She had begun attending painting classes at a local art school, rediscovering an artistic passion she had abandoned in her youth when she married my biological father and focused exclusively on being a wife and mother. Painting helps me express emotions constructively rather than destructively, she explained during one of our weekly phone conversations that we had established as part of the careful reconstruction process of our family relationship. When I feel jealousy or insecurity, instead of transforming that into competition with other people, I paint something that represents those feelings, and then discuss the painting with Dr. Silvera. Her artistic progress was evident not only in the canvases she began to produce, but also in how she spoke about herself and other women. There was much less comparison and much more genuine appreciation for others' achievements. Roberto told me that she had developed healthy friendships with other women her age in the painting classes, something that rarely happened before because she always felt in unnecessary and constant competition. For the first time since we got married, I see your mother genuinely happy with her own achievements instead of obsessed with what other people are doing, he observed during a lunch where he updated me on her progress. It was comforting to know that the therapeutic work was producing lasting changes that extended beyond our specific relationship, positively affecting all aspects of her social and emotional life. Gradually, I began to feel that perhaps it might be possible to rebuild a healthy maternal relationship based on mutual respect instead of destructive competition, although I knew it would be a long process requiring vigilance and constant work from both sides. The hope was cautious but real, fueled by small, consistent progress that accumulated over time in a clearly positive and constructive direction. The moment I truly understood that my mother had fundamentally changed came unexpectedly on a Saturday afternoon, when she called to tell me she had received an invitation to be a bridesmaid at a distant cousin's wedding, but had declined because the ceremony would take place on the same day as an art exhibition where I would be presenting some important architectural projects. I told her I had a very important commitment that day, supporting my daughter in a professional achievement, she explained with genuine pride in her voice, and that I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world, not even for a prestigious social event. The decision might seem small to outsiders, but to me it represented a revolutionary transformation. For the first time in my life, my mother had chosen to support me instead of competing or putting herself first in a social situation. "Mom, you didn't need to do that," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture and the symbolic meaning it represented in our reconstruction journey. "The exhibition isn't that important compared to a family wedding." But she interrupted my attempt to diminish the importance of the event. "Isabella, everything you achieve is important to me now, because I finally understood that your success doesn't diminish my value as a person. In fact, it fills me with genuine maternal pride." The words were exactly what I had dreamed of hearing during decades of a complicated relationship, and they finally sounded sincere rather than manipulative or calculated to get something in return. That afternoon, for the first time since childhood, I felt I really had a mother who supported me unconditionally, who cheered for my success without seeing it as a threat to her own identity or personal worth. The sensation was simultaneously new and familiar, like rediscovering something precious that I had lost long ago and given up as definitely gone forever. I decided I was ready to invite her to participate in the exhibition, not just as a spectator, but as an active part of my professional and personal support network that I was carefully rebuilding. It was a significant emotional risk, but I felt our relationship had progressed enough to justify this demonstration of renewed trust. The architecture exhibition where I presented my most recent projects became a symbolic milestone in our new relationship, representing the first time my mother attended one of my professional events without trying to steal the spotlight or transform the occasion into a competition about who received more attention from those present. She arrived dressed elegantly but age-appropriately, wearing a classic navy blue outfit that made her look sophisticated without trying to appear younger than she was, and carrying a small bouquet of yellow flowers, my favorites, as a way of showing support. Throughout the evening, I discreetly observed her behavior, looking for signs of old patterns of competitiveness or manipulation, but I was genuinely impressed with her mature and respectful demeanor that demonstrated real growth. When people asked about our family relationship, she responded with genuine pride. "This is my daughter Isabella. She is a brilliant architect, and I'm very proud of all her professional and personal achievements." There were no attempts to redirect attention to herself, no subtly competitive comments, and no behaviors that made me feel embarrassed or anxious as invariably happened in the past. Carla, who was also present at the event, whispered to me, "Your mother is completely different. She seems like a genuinely proud person, instead of someone pretending to be proud to get attention or external validation." My friend's observation confirmed that the changes were visible to outsiders, not just to me, who was desperately wanting to believe in progress and the possibility of genuine change. During the presentation of my projects, I saw my mother at the back of the room, listening attentively and smiling with an expression of authentic maternal pride that gave me additional confidence to speak about my work passionately and engagingly. It was as if her positive presence was energizing me instead of draining me, a completely new experience in our family relationship that moved me deeply. For the first time in decades, I felt I had a mother genuinely rooting for me, instead of someone secretly competing or looking for ways to diminish my achievements to feel better about herself. The success of the exhibition and my mother's supportive presence marked the beginning of a new phase in our relationship, where we began to build positive memories that gradually replaced decades of problematic and competitive interactions that had defined our previous dynamic in such a destructive way. In the following weeks, we established a tradition of bi-weekly lunches where we talked about our personal projects, professional challenges, and developments in our respective journeys of personal growth, always with the understanding that if either of us felt uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, we could use our established codes to redirect the dialogue. During one of these lunches, my mother showed me some of her recent paintings, vibrant landscapes and abstract portraits that revealed an artistic sensitivity I had never seen from her before, when her creative energy was blocked by competitiveness and constant insecurity. Therapy helped me rediscover parts of myself that had been buried by decades of obsessive focus on external validation, she explained, flipping through photos of the works on her phone with evident healthy pride. "Now when I paint, I feel an inner peace that I never experienced competing with other people or trying to prove my worth through constant comparisons with younger women." It was evident that she had found a source of personal fulfillment that didn't depend on diminishing other women or stealing attention from social situations that should be about other people. The contrast with the person who had kissed Diego at my party was so dramatic that sometimes it felt like I was meeting my mother for the first time as a complex and growing human being, instead of just as a source of family drama. During these meetings, I also began sharing with her some of my own challenges and insecurities, carefully testing if she could offer genuine support without turning our conversations into opportunities to compete or offer manipulative advice disguised as maternal concern. To my surprise and relief, she demonstrated a growing ability to listen without judging and offer emotional support without trying to control or direct my decisions according to her own emotional needs. It was as if she was learning to be a real mother for the first time, at 55, after decades of trying to use motherhood as a tool for personal validation, instead of as an opportunity to nurture and support another person. 12 months after that catastrophic birthday party that had exposed decades of hidden family toxicity, I found myself sitting in Dr. Silvera's office for our last joint therapy session, reflecting on the extraordinary journey of transformation that we had traveled together as mother and daughter through much work and mutual determination. The familiar room with its plants and calming paintings had witnessed tears, confrontations, painful revelations, and finally, moments of genuine connection and mutual understanding that I didn't believe were possible a year earlier when our relationship seemed irreparably broken. "You two have done exceptional work in deconstructing destructive patterns that probably dated back generations," observed Dr. Silvera, looking alternately at me and my mother with an expression of genuine professional satisfaction. "What impresses me most is how both of you were able to take responsibility for your parts in the dysfunctional dynamic, instead of simply blaming each other or victimizing yourselves during the healing process." My mother, sitting beside me with a relaxed posture that dramatically contrasted with the defensive tension she used to carry, smiled genuinely and said, "Doctor, for the first time in my adult life, I feel like I have a real daughter, not a competitor. And I also feel that I've finally become a real mother, not just an insecure woman pretending to know how to raise children while using motherhood for personal validation." Her words moved me deeply because they captured exactly the transformation I had experienced from my side of the relationship, where I finally felt seen and valued as an independent person. I also feel like I finally have a mother, I replied, holding her hand in a gesture that would have been impossible a year earlier. A mother who cheers for me instead of competing with me, who sees me as a separate person instead of an extension of her ego. The exchange of kind and honest words symbolically marked the end of a cycle of family pain, and the beginning of something completely new and healthy that we had built together, through much effort and courage to change. The improvised graduation ceremony from family therapy became a moment of genuine celebration that none of us had anticipated when we began that painful process of relational deconstruction and reconstruction that had demanded so much from both of us emotionally. Dr. Silvera gave us symbolic certificates, hand-decorated sheets of paper with personalized messages about our progress, which I kept as a memento of one of the most transformative experiences of my adult life. Isabella, you learned to establish healthy boundaries without cutting important relationships, and Marta, you learned to support without controlling and to love without competing, she wrote on the certificates that became tangible symbols of our extraordinary personal growth. During our walk to the parking lot after the final session, my mother and I talked about how our new dynamic had positively affected other aspects of our lives. She had developed deeper and more authentic friendships, while I had gained confidence in romantic and professional relationships. I no longer carried the unconscious weight of a competitive maternal relationship that had shaped my way of relating to other people for decades without my conscious awareness. You know what surprises me the most? She said while looking for her car keys. It's how I feel younger and more energized now that I don't spend energy trying to compete with younger women. I've discovered that maturity and authenticity are much more attractive than desperation disguised as youth, and much less emotionally exhausting. The observation demonstrated a self-awareness that she had never possessed before therapy, and made me realize that the psychological work had benefited not just our relationship, but also her relationship with herself and the world around her. "Mom, can I tell you something?" I asked when we reached our cars. "You look much more beautiful now than you did that night at the party. Because now your beauty comes from a genuine place instead of a desperate one." She hugged me with tears in her eyes, and for the first time since I was a child, I felt I was being hugged by a mother who truly loved me instead of someone who saw our relationship as a competition to be won. Did you like Isabella's story and her journey of family reconstruction? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from. Oh, and there's another story waiting for you here on the screen. Click there and I'll be waiting for you.